in the classroom. Excuse me. I think the next thing that we have to talk about would be what listening is according to the experts. So we may have different perceptions or definitions of listening, but let's take a look at what the experts say. All right. So what is listening? Of the total time spent on communicating, listening takes up 40 to 50%. Speaking takes up 25 to 30%, and then reading 11 to 16%, and writing about 9%. Don't you think this is an interesting research finding by Gilakjani and Amadi in 2011? This is the same thing as the one I showed you a while ago, but I gave you the complete statement wherein you find the breakdown of the time spent on communicating across the four communication skills. All right. So speaking, listening, writing, and reading. Okay. As an English teacher or as a teacher, like most of you, you probably would perceive or would think that communication in the classroom is mostly spent by reading, okay, or that it takes most of the time in the communication process, and that speaking probably would go next. However, this research finding by Gilakjani and Amadi tells us that it's actually listening that takes up half of the communication time spent in classroom. Okay, another one. Listening is the primary means by which incoming ideas and information are taken in. So Divine in 1982 emphasizes to us that listening is very, very important because it is the primary means in which we are able to receive ideas and information and accommodate them into our own system of knowledge and understanding and beliefs. Okay, so therefore, if we encounter difficulties in listening, that is also going to affect the kinds of ideas or the amount of ideas and or information that we are able to take in as learners. Next. Listening is central to the lives of students throughout all levels of educational development. I think the operative word here is central to the lives of students, or the word central. Okay, it's not just a sidetrack, it's not a sidekick to speaking. Rather, listening is the main character or the main protagonist in the lives of students as they go through the ladder or in their educational career. Okay, so as a teacher, it's important to be able to understand this so that we would know how to develop listening skills among our students, how to capitalize on using it so that our students can learn, and of course, how to come up with intervention and remediation so that we can make sure that our students get the most out of their educational careers through listening. Okay, so I'm showing you right now a picture of what would be a common scenario because of the new normal or the pandemic. This is how listening is going to look like right now. So you have your picture of a student with headphones, right, listening via Zoom or probably a Google meeting. Okay, and this is now how listening is going to look like in the new normal. After all the definitions of listening that I have mentioned to you, all the concepts of listening that I have discussed so far, I'm sure that you are going to be with me when I say that listening is fundamental to learning. Whether you are learning a language, which is English, which are English and Filipino, whether you are learning mathematics, whether you're learning concepts in science, or whether you're looking back in history with Araling Panlipunan, or you are reflecting on humanitarian concepts in ESP, or you are trying to look into the different civilizations and cultures of the world in MAPE, listening is going to be always fundamental to learning. Let's look at other definitions of listening. Listening is also the ability to identify and understand what others are saying. This by Tomlinson in 1984. So in this definition, Tomlinson is telling us two things. That when you listen, you should be able to identify information given to you. So when we say identify, you have to be able to decode the sound and decode the word and then identify and then put that in the overall context of what is being said to you so that you could to understand what others are saying. Okay. Also, listening helps us to understand the world around us and is one of the necessary elements in creating successful communication. Of course, we already know that listening is a crucial or a vital element in the communication process, but let us also remember that listening can help us understand the world around us because we are always coming from the idea that reading, okay, takes us to places, that reading takes us to worlds unknown. That when you open a book, you are going to experience vicarious experiences that your characters are going through. Okay, that when you open a book, you're going to learn about another world of knowledge that you probably didn't know before you opened that book. But no one says that when you listen to a podcast, you're going to learn a whole new world. Or no one says that when you listen to an audio recording, you will have vicarious experiences. Okay, what does this tell us? That tells us, that already tells us the hierarchy, if you may, between the communication skills that most of the time we regard reading more highly than listening, that we give more emphasis to reading more than listening, and that we practice reading more in our classrooms than listening. And that is a fact. Later on, I'm going to show you research on that. Okay. Now, De Vito in 2000 proposed a model for the steps of stages of the listening process. So, as you can see in the diagram I'm showing you right now, according to him, listening has 5 steps, which are the following. Okay, the first one is receiving the message. So receiving the message basically entails hearing and attending. So it means you are able to receive the sound waves or the vocal stimulus that was said to you in the communication process. Second one is understanding the message. This is where comprehension happens, all right? This is the part or the stage of the listening process in which you are already decoding the words, the sounds, and putting them into context and trying to identify what exactly is the overall message being sent to you. Number 3, evaluating the message would be actively criticizing what is being said to you, such as identifying whether it is true or false, whether it is truth or whether it is fact or opinion, or whether you're evaluating or judging the value of the statement. So that is evaluating the message. Responding to the message would be after you have evaluated it, so you have heard it, and then you understood it, then you evaluated it, then you respond. So meaning you are able to form your own idea or opinion, okay, or an answer to the communication prompt or stimulus given to you. And finally, retaining the message would be remembering what was said to you so that you can go back to it if you need it. So some theories or some models of the listening process would put retaining the message in the middle because they said that they argue that before you are able to evaluate the message, you have to retain what was said to you first, okay, so that you could more accurately give it an evaluation. But I am going to follow this listening process, which was proposed by De Vito in 2000 in our discussion. Now, among the 5 steps in the listening process cited by De Vito, the difficulty in listening or the breakdown in the communication process because of listening difficulty happens here in the first 2 steps. Okay, receiving the message and understanding the message. And if there is already a barrier in listening in steps 1 and 2, then the listener will not be able to reach 3, 4, and 5. Those 3 other steps in the listening process. So therefore, since we're going to focus on these first two steps or stages in the listening process, let us give a simple definition to them. Okay. So the first one is receiving stage, which is the stage involves hearing or the physiological process of registering sound waves as they hit the eardrum. So basically it's hearing, all right? It's receiving the sound that was said to you, okay? Because it is listening. And then the second one that it involves is attending, which is the process of accurately identifying particular sounds as words. So when you hear the sound, you are still in the receiving stage after you have identified that the sounds make sense because they are words that you remember, or you are able to make out words in the sounds that were said to you. Okay, so that's still receiving stage. Now you move into the second one, the second stage, which is understanding. And this is the stage of listening during which the listener determines the context and meanings of the words that are heard. Okay, it's not enough that you heard and then you identified the words in isolation, okay? Because you can only say that you understood the message if you are able to put those words together, okay, and identify the relationship of these words together, and then look into what context is the message coming from, and finally identifying the overall message of these words in this context. Okay, that is what we call the understanding stage in the communication or in the stages of listening process. Now, in the discussion of the listening difficulties, as I have said a while ago, ultimately, the concern would be failure in communication. And in understanding the message that causes the breakdown in communication because of a myriad of factors that we will discuss in a bit. Now, in the classroom, this translates to distraction, poor comprehension, low scores, demotivation, and many others. So it means that if our students are experiencing listening difficulty in receiving stage or understanding stage, that is going to affect their understanding of what you are talking about in your lesson or whatever instruction or message you're giving them. And not only that, in the long run, that's going to have an impact on their performance in your class, such as their scores. And also, that's going to affect how motivated they are in your class as a whole. Okay? Since we're talking about the impact of listening difficulty, or if students are experiencing listening difficulty to their own learning, it's important for us to also understand what listening comprehension is. So let's take a look at that. Listening comprehension is not only a concern of the language teachers, so English and Filipino is not only our concern. It is actually a concern of all teachers. As long as you are a teacher who gives listeners lectures, dictation, film viewing, podcast listening, among others, listening comprehension is your. So hear about listening comprehension, do not think anymore that that's only for English or that's only for Filipino. No, if you are a teacher who is giving listening activities or viewing and listening activities, then listening comprehension is your concern. Comprehension is. Okay, first, according to Ross 2002 and Hamuda in 2013, listening comprehension is an interactive process in which listeners are involved in constructing. Okay, let's take a look at this definition of listening comprehension. It is a process, an interactive process in which you as a listener is trying to construct meaning from what you said. Okay, so remember the receiving stage. You received the sound waves or you heard the message of the words in those sounds. Okay? And after that, in your state, and then you come up with your constructed meaning you are not going to construct an accurate meaning out of the message that was said to you. Go problem. Also, listening comprehension is when listeners comprehend or knowledge, intonation, and other linguistic or non-linguistic clues. So you see, listening comprehension is a complex process that a listener will have to do for him to be able to say that he understood the message. So it's a lot of work, okay, for you to be able to understand a message or an utterance that you heard. Because for you to be able to go to the stage of understanding or comprehending that message, there are other things you have to do, such as discriminate the sounds. Okay, of course, we don't like literally think about these things. It happens automatically, right? But these are the things that happens when we are listening. We try to discriminate sound, then we apply our previous knowledge. We look into the grammatical rules, such as you ask yourself, is this a question? Is a declarative sentence? So statement lang ba to? Or nagtatanong siya? Okay? Yung intonation niya ay galit ba siya? Malungkot ba siya? Okay? Yung stress ng word, ano ba yung pinaka-importanting word dun sa sinabi niya na gusto niyang matandaan ko? Okay? So these are the things that are going through our minds when we are listening. We will listen. Again, it's not literally that we think about it, it happens automatically. But it's important for us to know this because somewhere here, if one of these things or some of these things are jeopardized, communication or listening will have a breakdown. Okay, next. Also, listening comprehension is one's ability to comprehend spoken language at the discourse level, including conversation, stories, and informational or texts. That involves the process of extracting and constructing meaning. All right, so first thing, listening comprehension is your ability to comprehend or understand a spoken language or something that you heard. Okay? And it doesn't have to be in the word level. Hindi pwedeng ang kaya mo lang intindihin sa isang sentence na sinabi ng teacher mo ay yung magkakahiwalay na salita. Because it's not going to be a complete message, all right? It's not even enough that you understand one clause or one part of the sentence and not the other because it's not going to be an accurate message. How can you say that you have comprehended it correctly? It has to be in a discourse level, meaning you should be able to understand it in the entire context of the whole conversation, in the entire context of stories that you are listening to, and in the entire context of an informational or a lecture text that you are listening to. For example, I'm doing a webinar right now on listening difficulties. If you came here to this webinar just 1 minute ago, you might find it difficult to get the entire context of what I'm saying, or you might not have a full grasp of where this webinar will go because you are not able to catch some of the things that I said earlier. Okay, so since you can compare what we're doing right now as a conversation, okay? It's like I am conversing to you, although you are not replying, of course, because we are doing it via YouTube, okay? So we are doing a conversation of a certain topic, which is intervention activities on for listening difficulties. If you are not able to catch the beginning of our conversation, you are going to have a difficulty understanding the rest of it unless you ask someone what was said earlier, like anong sinabi ni sir kanina na hindi ko na naintindihan or hindi ko na gets, etc. Okay. Now, after looking at what listening is and what listening comprehension is, I came up with this idea that listening is a vital part of acquiring knowledge and should be given a lot of attention both in the teaching and learning process and in research. I hope that you would agree with me when I say this, because given all the evidence I have shown a while ago, which mostly are research-based, listening is really a very crucial part of acquiring learning. And if you have difficulties or if your learners experience difficulties in listening, then acquiring knowledge would also be difficult to them. And since listening is very important in learning, then we should give a lot of attention to it in our teaching and learning process and also in research. Okay, but let's do what millennials or the Generation Z would call real talk. Okay, so let's do a real talk. So, in preparation for this webinar on listening difficulties, I did a mini survey. Okay, I did a mini survey with my colleagues in Makati High School, and I would like to thank those teachers who responded to the mini survey that I did because they are very helpful to this research. Now, since the mini survey is just implemented in one school, of course, we are not going to say that it is conclusive. Okay, we're not going to say that it is something that we can generalize from. But what I would like to point out with this real talk and with this mini survey is that we have studied a lot of theories already in the past few minutes. Okay, we have studied a lot of theories already. I wanted to go down to the grassroots. I wanted to know what exactly are teachers doing in their listening activities in their classes. I was able to gather information from different subject areas. I had several teachers who answered the survey. Some are from science department, from English department, from PLE, from Araling Panlipunan, from MAPE. All right, and as I told you a while ago, all teachers do listening activities. So again, it's not only for the language teachers. Okay, let's do real talk. I asked them 3 questions, but I will only present to you the 2 questions, which I think are very vital to our conversation today. What are those 2 questions? First question I asked them, what listening or viewing activities do you usually do in your classrooms? So what listening or viewing activities do you usually do in your classrooms? And I was able to summarize all the responses into this. Okay, listening to audio recordings, which could be conversations, discussions, news, speeches, lectures, and stories, many others. All right, so you probably also do this in your class. Maybe sometimes you like put your laptop on loudspeaker and then you ask your learners to listen to a discussion, maybe to a debate, maybe to listen to a news report, okay, maybe listen to Steve Jobs' speech from TED Talk. Okay, you probably did that. And then, of course, you give lectures, maybe sometimes to put variation in what you do. Instead, you play an audio recording of a lecture that you are doing for that day. Okay, maybe instead of telling the story, you find a material which is a recorded telling of a story. I did this once when I discussed Beowulf, all right, because I'm teaching grade 9. So in my discussion of Beowulf, I took an excerpt of it because, of course, it's a very long poem. So I just took an excerpt of it, the most exciting part, which is the battle with Grendel, all right, and I recorded it myself so that instead of me reading it to the class, because they probably won't, okay, they will not because they probably will not find it interesting. So what I did was I gave them the text and I played my recording of it. So that's one thing that you can do. And according to my survey, this is something that teachers do. Of course, everyone probably has done film showing in class. Sometimes you do it by department. Sometimes you do it as an entire school. Okay. And sometimes after we do the film showing, we ask our students to do a movie review. Okay, they probably come together, right? They're married to each other. Viewing of documentary videos and films, especially true for Araling Panlipunan. MAPE also, maybe if you want to tackle the lives of the world famous artists, okay, or musicians or composers. And then watching TED or YouTube videos related to the lesson. Of course, everyone has probably done this. You discuss grammar, so instead you play a lecture of that from YouTube. You wanted to teach about how to write an informative speech. So what you did is you play a TED video about it or a TED talk that shows that. And for example, you wanted to discuss about martial law, maybe. So you play a video from YouTube that you think is going to supplement your discussion. Listening to podcasts, of course, I wouldn't say this is very common because number one, podcast is not very popular in the Philippines. Okay, but there are teachers who do this in our school and listening to reports of classmates. So sometimes we ask our learners to master a certain topic and discuss about it in class. So the others who are not discussing, they are basically listening to their classmates report. Okay, so these are only some of the listening activities that the teachers that I surveyed said that they do in class. Probably you can relate to them. I'm sure there are some here that you have done or that you continue to do even after all these years. Now, is there anything wrong about doing these listening activities in class? The answer to that is there's nothing wrong. No. Okay, so there's nothing wrong about doing these activities. I have done some of it, okay, myself, and I will probably continue to do them if I have a chance, let's say after the pandemic, or even maybe during our synchronous sessions with my class. Okay, so there's nothing wrong about them. However, what I would like to focus on is the second question that I asked them. What problems do you encounter with students during a listening or viewing activity? So I think this is the more interesting part because as teachers, we know our pedagogy, we know our strategies, we know our techniques, okay? But the more important question to ask is, what is the effect of our strategies? How do our students respond to our activities? Do they enjoy it? Do they learn from it? If they don't, why? Where does the problem lie? Is it us? Is it the strategy itself? Is it the learners who are to be blamed for it? Let's see. Okay, so we have here a vector of a learner who looks bored, okay, in a listening activity. The question is, what problems do you encounter with your students when you are doing a listening activity with them or a viewing activity with them? Because you see, when you ask your students to watch a video, they have a visual, it's called viewing, but of course they are listening also. So that's what I'm trying to point out with the listening viewing activity. Okay, so what are the problems teachers encounter when they give a listening activity to their students? The number one answer that I was able to gather is lack of interest. Okay, according to the teachers I surveyed, most of the time when they do listening activities, their learners show a lack of interest. Could it be lack of interest in the activity? Could it be because the topic is not interesting to them? Okay, or could it be because of the techniques that we do in class? Maybe our instructions are not enough. Okay, next one is lack of comprehension. So probably we play a video or we ask them to listen to an oral text, but they do not comprehend the message. They cannot understand it. Okay, so that is one other response. So the next one is they can't understand some words. As a teacher, I find it interesting why my students would not be able to understand some words. I want to find out the root problem of that so that I would know what to do. The next time I give a listening activity, I will have to address that first. Next one, they can't understand fast speech. Okay? So if I'm talking too fast right now, maybe some of you would say, "Di ko maintindihan si sir, sobrang bilis niya." Okay? And this is something that our students probably encounter in a daily basis. Hindi lang sa pag-play natin ng video, hindi lang sa pag-play ng audio, baka po sa pagkasalita natin. When we dictate, our speech is too fast. I'm guilty with that because, as you can tell, I speak fast because if I don't, my thoughts would be lost. Okay. And finally, incorrect understanding of information. This can happen that the learner is able to receive the message, heard it, and then they're able to construct meaning to that message that they heard. But also they are able to have like an understanding, a sort of understanding of that message. But the question is the understanding correct, right? Like I read one response from the survey that I did. One teacher said that, so my students are going to listen to the story, they're able to get some parts of it correctly, but when you ask them to tell the story, they are going to have a different version of it. Okay, so there is construction of meaning there. They are able to decode parts of the communication given to them or the message given to them, but it's not accurate. So that is incorrect understanding of information. Okay. So therefore, I think the next question we have to ask ourselves is, why do we have learners who experience listening difficulties? Why is it that our learners lack interest? Why is it that they comprehend it incorrectly? Why can't they catch up with the fast delivery of the speech? Why is it that they are not able to understand the words? Okay, because these are all examples of listening difficulties. And as teachers, it is our responsibility to know why there is communication or learning breakdown because of difficulty. Okay. Let's take a look. Listening and speaking skills are not important parts of many course books or curricula, and teachers do not seem to pay attention to these skills while designing their lessons. Again, real talk, this is coming from research. Okay, so one researcher found out by surveying books, curricula, that listening is not given much attention in books, in curriculum, and maybe we teachers ourselves, when we write our lesson plans, we don't necessarily consciously think of including listening to it. Think about it. Do we sometimes just put listening there as a motivation? When I say motivation, like nilagay nyo yung video para lang maaliw yung mga bata, para sumigla sila sa umpisa. That's not necessarily a listening activity intended for learning, right? Or do we just play the video so that we can rest? Kasi 5 po yung klase namin, sir, nakakapagod talaga. So, sir, pwede ba yung sa dulo video na lang lahat sila? Panoorin ko lang sila ng Wonder Woman or Avengers. That happens, real talk, right? Do we consciously think about this lesson, a listening activity for the curriculum according to MELCs? Do we even have listening in MELCs? Okay, so I would like to align it. This according to research. Most teachers take it for granted and believe that it will develop naturally within the process of language learning. Again, let me say that again. Most teachers take it for granted and believe that it will develop naturally within the process of language learning. The question we asked a while ago, why is it that our students experience learning difficulties? It is because, listening difficulties, it is because of these reasons. Because sometimes as teachers, we take it for granted. Either we do it, but not develop it. Okay, like for example, pinakinig lang natin sila to test them. Okay, not necessarily para matuto silang makinig. And sometimes probably you also believe na, ay, matututunan naman nila yan. Like, hindi ko na kailangan ituro sa kanila yung paano makinig or hindi ko na kailangan sanayin sila sa pakikinig. Okay? Because natural naman yan silang matututo niyan. Okay? Also, we tend to think that listening is a skill that, we think that according to research, listening is a skill that tends to be neglected because we tend to think that it is automatically acquired by the learner. Okay? And also, there is, I cannot see this part, a misconception that students can deal with listening difficulties on their own. Students encounter listening difficulties according to that students are able to deal with it on their own. And finally, Teaching students higher level cognitive and metacognitive strategies and self-monitoring strategies will solve listening to ng reading, writing, okay, or ng speaking. Kasi ang pananaw natin, or nagtuturo tayo ng mas mataas, mga higher level order thinking skills. Because to think, our notion is that the listening problems will take care of itself. However, according to research, that's not the case. So maybe it's the time for us to open our ears, to the fact that listening should also receive a lot of attention to us teachers or from us teachers. Okay. So let's dig deeper into the problem, okay, by looking into what actually causes listening difficulties. As teachers, we have to be able to address them so that we can make sure that our learners will not experience them and will have in all our subjects, whatever subject we be teaching. So let's discuss what causes listening difficulties. I'm going to listen which are one speaker, one the number two, or the message, then okay, later I'm going to tell you what we mean by channel here. Okay, let's talk about the first one, which is the speaker. Okay, there are several factors in the speaker that causes listening difficulty. So the first one is in terms of the speech rate. Okay, a text spoken at normal speed or even at a slow speed is usually perceived as being very fast by low proficiency level students. So right now, even right now, some might feel comfortable with my speed. Some of you would feel that I'm too fast. Okay, and the same is true for our students, especially if our students have low proficiency level. Kahit nasa kaklase nila, normal lang naman yung bilis ng pagkasalita dun sa recording or ni teacher, para sa kanila parang ang bilis. Okay, this is according to research. Because the learning proficiency level of the student affects his or her perception of speech. Okay, so this means that we have to get to know all our students. And make necessary adjustments with them. Maybe when we give a lecture, we have to maybe material o yung video, hindi sa yung speaker kasi the speech rate is actually a source of listening. Okay, next one. Still on speech rate. Often can stand much of what they hear, not because the content is difficult or the language is too hard, but because the speakers speak too fast. So ibig sabihin, hindi lang pala laging, ang hirap kasi yung sinasabi, parang sobrang highfalutin, sobrang komplikado ng topic, hindi pala laging ganon. At hindi lang dahil English yung ginagamit. That causes listening difficulty and therefore affects learning. Okay. Next one, any increase result in a decrease in comprehension. The scale, bumibilis yung ating speed rate or yung speed ng pagkasalita natin, mababa comprehension. To go about that, if you want to increase comprehension, then dapat mas mabagal yung pagkasalita. Okay? One important knowledge that we should remember as teachers. So hindi tayo kukuha ng YouTube videos na sobrang bilis magsalita nung ating nung speaker because it's a incomprehensible. Okay, there's this interesting excerpt from the research of Finlandia, in which they interviewed the respondents. This is what one of the respondents said about speech rate. The speed is too fast for me. I cannot catch up. Look at the word catch. I cannot catch up with the speed. I only catch a few words. So parang ganun yung pananaw ng mga bata. They're listening. They're trying to catch the words that we say. I'm really busy trying to catch the words and do not have much time left to think about other things. So because of the fast rate of your speech, kapag nagdi-discuss tayo, kapag tayo ay nag-lecture, or nag-play tayo ng recording, YouTube video, or whatever that is, kapag sobrang bilis, our students will be very busy trying to get all the words here, trying to identify all the words that they hear anymore to think about what is the meaning of this word. What does the meaning of this word have to do with the other word? And what's the overall message of this? So it's a very busy thing to do. Okay, so speech rate is very important consideration when choosing materials and when giving listening activity. Phonetic variation. Okay, this sounds very linguistic, but do not be intimidated by it, because it is something that our students should be able to identify or should be able to master so that they won't experience difficulty. Phonetic variation is when words or phrases sound blurry when phonetic variation is applied to them, such as assimilation and elision. So these are very two linguistic terms, but let me indulge with me a little bit. I will discuss with you what elision is, and how they could possibly become a difficulty in name. Okay. Assimilation is a general term phonetics for the process by which a speech sound becomes similar or identical to a neighboring sound. Words that we say, some of them got they start to sound similar or identical do sa mga katabi nilang sound. And because of that, kapag ang estudyante ay hindi ganoon kabihasa na makinig sa English, for example, then they might misinterpret some of the words and affect their comprehension. Just like the sentence, nice to meet you, okay? Sometimes meet and you, the sounds mix, so that we say meet you, meet you. But you don't nearly say to meet you, right? Sometimes you say nice to meet you. The T and the Y become assimilated together, so meet you, okay? Would you like tea, all right? You don't waste you. Would you like some tea? We say would you like some tea? So the sound of wood gets mixed or assimilated into the would you, all right? If is not very familiar about segmenting sounds, okay, or the boundary, it cause a listen difficult. Would all right, still on phonetic variation is elision. All right, elision is the omission of sounds in speech. This is done to make the language easier, sister. That only listening ay oral speech. Okay, so pinapakinggan natin from the sounds. To make the words easier to say or easier to faster. No, sometimes no. Okay. You do some sounds in the word so that you can say the phrase faster. I don't know. What if the student doesn't understand do know? Like, do know daw, sir, ano daw po? Okay. And camera, some would say camera. Can you hand open camera? Ano pong camera, right? So it's really, it could actually be a source of a listening difficulty. Remember, just recently, there is one TikTok video that became viral in which there is a lady correcting pronunciations in English. So sabi niya doon, like the word comfortable. Who's comfortable says that? That's comfortable. You don't say comfortable. However, that is only one thing that happens. It's called elision. In the word comfortable, it's applied by the variation elision. But the varieties of English, such as in Philippine English, which is legitimate, it is accepted to say comfortable. All right, so it's not incorrect. So I just mentioned that because I remember it's one example of elision. Okay. In speech, words tend to blend with the surrounding word, thus making it difficult to clearly perceive the boundary between words. Problem with listening. From Fernandez and Farrell, 2010. One respondent, I have great difficulty in recognizing the words in the sentences. I always try to catch the words when I listen, but it's so hard for me. Phonetic variation. Hindi niya ma-recognize yung mga boundaries ng words. Okay. That is listening. Okay, this is what the blending of words look like. Okay, according to this researcher, spoken language seems like a a related listening difficulty with the speaker is accent. Okay, accent. Take a look at that. Accent is a manner of pronunciation distinct to a particular individual, location, or nation. Okay? Kahit po pareho kayong Tagalog nagsasalita, pwedeng magkaiba yung paraan ninyo ng pagbigkas ng salita. Ganun din sa English, kahit the way the Americans speak a word would be different, maybe different from the way Australians would say it or the British would say it, how a Singaporean will say it, and varieties of English accent. Okay? Nagbigay ka ng video sa students mo kasi ang lesson mo, say, ay, ano ba? For example, you want to talk about one significant event in human history. Kumuha ka ng video na documentary sa YouTube, okay? And then this video is actually produced or created by, let's say, by the British. So, nila is from Americans, and our students, Filipino students, are more familiar with the American accent because that's what we teach them. Although again, nagbago na yung American accent sa atin because we now have what we call a Philippine English, but that's the origin of our pronunciation. So students may encounter a lot of difficulty listening to your oral text or to the video you gave them if the accent is impeding their understanding or they cannot understand the accent, and it's a very real problem. I myself, as a teacher, an English teacher, I sometimes find it hard to listen to British accent or Australian accent. Okay, even sa US, kahit na American English ang gamit nila, when you go to different states, magkakaiba rin ng mga tunog. Okay, so to watch sometimes na American naman ang gumawa, Hollywood, pero sobrang hirap intindihin because of the accent of the which is distinct to a certain location or a certain state. Speakers, one of most that listener comprehension. So take note of that. Accent is affecting listener comprehension. So when you choose materials for listening activity, kahit science pa yan or mathematics, halimbawa nagdi-discuss sa math ng mga operations, okay, or concepts in mathematics, it's important that we as teachers check the video, listen to it, and then try to put ourselves in the level of the students if our students could be able to understand that. Okay, another excerpt from the same research I showed you a while ago. Many words sounded familiar to me, but I just couldn't think of their meanings immediately. Barrier in the listening and the learning process yung accent. So, familiar yung bata dun sa word, pero kasi parang iba yung pronunciation niya because of the accent. And because of that, parang because his business in trying to identify the word which is sounding differently because of the accent, parang sobrang busy niya na to get to the meaning of the word. Okay, that's going to pose a problem in learning, in listening, and therefore in learning also. O, sabi niya rito, when I try to recall their meanings, I always miss the sentences that came after. So again, barrier siya. If the accent of the speaker is difficult for us to listen to and understand and identify the words, it's not going to work. All right, let's go to the second one, which is text. All right, the second factor that causes difficulty in listening. When I say text here, I mean the message or what we listen to or the script that is being said in the listening activity, whether script calls your speaker or whether it is your discussion lecture in class or yung script or yung speech ng isang on these are all the text. It's about the message that's being sent. Okay. One factor with regard to text that could pose a listening difficulty is complexity of the text, which involves okay, if the text is above the listener's level of comprehension. Ibig sabihin, yung level ng inyong listener is at this level and then the text you gave them is much higher or is higher than that. Okay, which might have unfamiliar vocabulary that are very technical, that of course they don't know. Difficult grammatical structure. So if hindi nila level yung grammatical structure nun, of course that's already a barrier for them to be able to listen to it properly. Length of the text is another one. Most complex texts are long. Okay, so you have to choose appropriate the length of text that your listeners or your children or your learners should understand. Also, the fourth one is amount of concepts and information to process. Baka yung oral text na pinapang mga bata na mag-information overload na sila. That's already a barrier to learning, which springs from the difficulty of listening to it. Okay? So, this research, when we are looking for listening text that we want to give our students, it's much better if we give the easy ones or the easier ones. Okay? It doesn't have to be difficult to understand. It doesn't have complex in construction. Something just within their level. There's even one research that says a level lower than their own. Okay, because that's how they're going to learn much better. All right. Second one is context. Okay, so we're talking about the message that you're saying or the message that's being played in the video or recording that you are giving your students. Context would be background knowledge. Baka naman yung text that we give them, they don't have enough understanding of the background knowledge of that. Okay? Or they are unfamiliar with the topic or culturally, hindi nila alam yung topic na yon. I remember that some trainers would always point out, why would you give a text to your students about snow when culturally or climate natin, we don't have snow, right? So that's already a barrier to them. The context of the listening text you're giving to them can be a barrier. Naman culturally different, pero they don't have enough background knowledge about that. Okay? Or they're not familiar with the topic of what you're giving them. That's already going to cause a listening difficulty. Okay, task is also could also be a listening difficulty. Tasks also affect how students understand a listening text. Okay, what are the different factors when it comes to the task that could cause a difficulty in listening? Okay, first, kung yung task natin ay immediate response versus delayed recall, ano ibig sabihin? Meron tayong listening task na nakikinig yung mga bata At ang pinapagawa natin habang sila ay nakikinig ay something that they are going to be able to answer immediately while they are listening. Okay? For example, ang gusto mo lang ay bilugan ninyo yung words, yung keywords that would appear in the text as you listen. Or i-check ninyo yung mga pictures that you think are related to immediate response because right away gagawin nila pagkapakinig nila. The other one, delayed recall, ito yung mas mahirap. Ibig sabihin, they have to listening, they have to finish the lecture, the discussion, the video, at after nun, i-recall nila yung mga information. Tsaka nila sasagutan. According to research, what is the better activity to do to avoid listening difficulty? It's immediate response. Let your students do something while they are listening. Okay? Kasi listening in it might find it boring. Baka makatulog sila. But with a task at hand while listening, they would feel a sense of accomplishment in itself because they will be able to confirm right away if their answers are correct while they are listening. At it has lesser opportunities for them to encounter listening difficulties. All right, so immediate response is a much better activity. Although it's not all the time naman that you would do it. Of course, may mga times that you want to do delayed recall, medyo mas high level, okay? But let's start with the also, with regard to task, amount of information to be processed. So baka naman yung task na binigay natin would require our students a lot of information. And already a burden to them to listen, to decode, call, okay? They are listening to. And kung binigay pa natin is that na gagawin while they are listening, that's going to add to their burden. Okay, so let's be cautious about that and let's think about those things when we prepare activities. Available to finish the task. And I will add to this the amount of time of listening to the text that you give them. Because in the mini survey that I did, may mga teachers who said that the students are not able to understand kasi sobrang haba ng video, hindi nila natapos. It can happen. 1 hour lang po tayo sa klase, baka yung video mo 45 minutes. So wala ka na, tapos wala ka ng good morning, wala ka ng attendance, wala ka ng routine, di ba? So you have to think about that, okay? And provision of visual support, very important. I would suggest that if you're going to do a listening activity, you give a support or a supplementary to that. Pwede, while they are listening, you have a copy of the text that they are reading, which is the text of the listening text, okay? The printed text of the listening or oral text. In that way, as they listen, they'll be able to confirm and follow through as they read, okay? Ano pang examples ng visual support? Sometimes when you show a video, then while the listener, the speaker is saying something, may mga words na lalabas sa video or may mga pictures na lalabas sa video. That is what you call visual support. And based on research, that is going to make your task easier and could avoid listening difficulty. So let's do that, di ba? Baka naman sobrang haba ng task natin, nakikinig lang sila lahat. It's much better if they have something to read while they are listening, or yung pipili nating videos, they have visual support so that the students can confirm their understanding of what they're listening to. All right. Going to the third factor, it's the listener, okay? The listener or the learners themselves. How can a listening difficulty come from the listener? Let's see. Emotional and physical issues. Di ba sabi ko sa inyo kanina, kung hindi kayo listening, that is going to be a listening difficulty. Kapag meron silang pinagdadaanan, that's what we call it, di ba, sa mga estudyante. Pag meron silang pinagdadaanan, be a barrier to their listening comprehension or low level of comprehension for them. Okay, let's see what are emotional and physical issues that our students could experience. First, nervousness and lack of confidence. We are in the new normal, okay? And our students, kung tayo hirap na hirap tayo kung paano gagawin tong new normal. We do a lot of webinars, like every day tayo nag-webinar, pero when we nag-simulate tayo, hirap pa rin tayo, di ba? What more of our students, di ba? This is going to be first time for them as well. Have started with school, nakita ninyo how the students react. For us in the public school, I'm sure that one factor is estudyante because they don't know, they didn't have enough practice about how to do this. Hindi nila probably alam kung paano ba mag-interact kapag tiled yung screen mo, nandiyan lahat ng kaklase mo at yung teacher mo nandiyan. 40 people na nakikita mo sa screen, how do you behave? Pareho ba yung behavior ko dapat? Like, how do you do it? Nervousness. Okay? When you give them a happy or when you do your lecture synchronous nervousness na, ay, baka hindi ko pag yung connection. Ano pag nag-choppy? Hindi ko naman pwede sabihin kay sir, sir, paulit naman. Di ba? One factor there, hindi mo kasi paulit yung speaker. That is one characteristic of listening. Hindi mo naman pwedeng sabihin, sir, Dan, paki-pause nga, o di kaya sabihin mo ay ulitin mo. Unlike with reading, pwede mong balikan, di ba? Unless recorded yan, video or audio recording, pwede mong i-rewind. Pero if it's live, for example, nag-lecture yung teacher, nakaka-nervous yun kung makukuha mo ba yung lahat ng sinasabi ng teachers mo. Paano kung may na-miss ka, importante lumabas sa quiz, right? Lack of confidence. What if the student is not very familiar with Zoom, with Google Classroom, and all the other apps that we give them for them to use? That issue as well. Anxiety and frustration. All right, so we are not unaware na a lot of I'm sure probably some of us also experience that. Some of the people viewing this video right now, you have probably experienced episodes of anxiety and frustration because of the pandemic. Are our learners immune to that? No, of course they also experience that. Okay, they also experience that. When we do an oral session with them, in which, of course, they are going to listen, those anxieties and frustrations that they experience outside of our online class, that could be a difficulty in learning or in listening for them. Nakikinig sa lecture, kaya nasa isip nila ay, pa ba itong pandemic? Will I be able to see my friends again? Is the classroom going to be like this forever? Like in the next few months or years? Meron na bang vaccine? Paano pag naubos yung pambili ko na internet connection? Maa-absenan ba ako? Right? These are things that could cause anxiety and frustration among our students that could impede even their listening abilities. Okay? Lack of interest and motivation. Kanina, I showed you in my mini survey or research na lumabas, number 1, hindi interested yung mga bata dun sa mga pinapakinig natin sa kanila. So we have to do something about that. Motivation. Buong araw kang nagpakinig, alright? Or sa isang linggo, 5 teachers nila ang nagpa-listening activity. Tapos, 3 out of those 5 listening activities, ang baba ng score nila or hindi nila na-enjoy yung kanilang pakikinig, that's going to affect their motivation. Baka magpakinig ka, audio or ka ng video, tapos sobrang labo ng internet connection, choppy, tapos bukas pa nila hindi marinig, ayaw na nila tuloy makinig at all. Unfamiliarity with technology. So sinabi ko na kanina, hindi nila alam gamitin yung Zoom, yung Google Meet. Okay? May mga ganong bata. Kahit sabihin natin na Gen Z sila, they are digital natives. Yes, not everyone hindi alam ang technology. Alright? So they're listening. The next one is language competence. Okay, so naman na yung na-build nating skills sa mga bata throughout the time that they were in school. Language skills that they have. Okay. Topical knowledge. Marami ba silang alam na topics? Baka yung binigay nating listen nila alam kung ano yan, yung topic na yan. So, that's a barrier to listening. Vocabulary knowledge. Ang daming unfamiliar vocabulary dun sa video. Hindi mo in-unlock. So that's going to be a listening barrier or difficulty for them. Cognitive demands made by the content of the text. So ibig sabihin, alam natin that our learners have different cognitive abilities, right? May mga iba-iba silang levels of cognitive abilities. Now, if we give a listening text na medyo advanced, paano naman yung mga sa baba, yung mga those who have lesser cognitive abilities, diba? So that's going to pose a challenge for them kasi mahirap nang makinig, mabagal yung internet connection mo, tumitilaok yung manok sa kapitbahay, naka-on yung mic nung 5 mong kaklase, tapos ang hirap pa nung text. Okay, that's all springing from the fact that your learner doesn't have a high language competency to be even more of a burden. And insufficient listening skills practice. So, grade 9 yung student natin. Like ako, grade 9 yung student ko. Grade 1 to grade 8, wala naman masyadong practice ng listening. Like siguro, ang teachers, for example, nagpapakinig lang once a month or twice a month. Yun talagang listening activity. So, the rest, hindi naman ganon. Okay? Hindi naman ganon like a full-blown na listening activity or a out. So our students do not have enough listening skills practice. Nagka-pandemic, naging Zoom yung klase mo, naging Google Meet, tas puro listening. Of course, it's going to pose a challenge, a listening difficulty, lack of practice. Okay, lack of practice. Kapag hindi ka kapag nagbasa ka, mahirap for you. Ganun din sa listening. Kung wala ka enough practice, it's going to pose a listening difficulty for you. All right. And finally, the fourth factor of listening that causes listening difficulty is, of course, physical setting and channel. Okay. So, physical setting or physical environment, alam natin maraming distraction. Putting it into context ng normal. Okay. Kung ulit, internet connection natin, yung kapatid mo, maingay, yung nanay mong inuutusan ka, okay, yung kapitbahay mong may construction, these are physical environment na are going to affect different of your learners. So ito yung binigay mong video, yung internet connection mo ay mahina, so hindi lang kita video sa Google Meet. Or naman yung mo at ng learners mo, pero yung gamit nilang sound system, like yung headset naman nila ay hindi nag-work, or yung speaker ng laptop or ng cellphone, they're very poor, it's going to affect difficulty. And of course, everyone experiences this internet connection. I think while you are listening to me, at several points, nag-Shopee ako or medyo may na rin receive a notification that my internet connection is unstable. And it happens, okay? Internet connection is an example of a factor that could cause this. Alam natin yan, like nag-Google Meet tayo, choppy si teacher or choppy yung kaklase mo na nagsasalita, then definitely you will be able to understand. Listening comprehension caused by the poor internet connection. All right. Because during the new normal, the internet is our channel, di ba? So wala naman tayong face-to-face communication. Hindi mo pwedeng magtawagan tayo tapos doon tayo mag-lecture, right? So really, it's the Google Meet and Zoom, or I don't know if the others would use Facebook in their synchronous session. But right now, generally, the internet is a channel in delivering our instruction. So just internet connection is going to cause a barrier in communication, then it will also cause listening difficulties. Therefore, as teachers, we have to look at intervention strategies that could remedy solve listening difficulties that our learners are going to encounter kasi that's our new normal. All right, I'm going to give it 12. Them with you briefly, and hopefully you would be able to apply them in planning your lessons. Okay, and hopefully after this you would be more interested in giving listening activities and more conscious now about how you will think about your listening activities. Okay. The first one is discussion of the purpose for listening. It's going to help our students to set their mind about what they need to do in the listening activities if they know kung bakit sila nakikinig. So at the beginning, tell your students, are we going to listen to get specific information? Are we going to listen because we will summarize this later? Are we going to listen kasi ikukwento natin yung story after? Okay, so discuss the purpose for listening. All right, next, activate prior knowledge. So we give them a text or we give a discussion about a certain topic. And if our students are not familiar with that, that's a barrier to their listening comprehension. So give them background knowledge or review what they already know about it. Okay, so that they won't be at a loss. Paano yung ating prior knowledge activation? Pwedeng mag-discuss muna tayo a little about it, or we review a past lesson about it, or we show them pictures for discussion. Okay, so those are examples. Okay, next, pre-teaching keywords, unknown words or phrases, idioms, and technical terms. We don't want that our students will be listening to it or will be listening to our lecture, and in the middle of it, they will catch words that they don't know and will therefore not be able to understand the them. So we can pre-teach those keywords, define them, okay? If they are idiomatic, give them what it means in the text that you are going to discuss. If there are technical terms or jargons, define it to them so that when they encounter it in your oral text, they will understand the message. Fourth is different kinds of input. So let's not limit ourselves to just YouTube videos. Pwede tayong magpakita ng lectures, pwede tayong gumawa ng audio recorder, own voices, all right? Pwede news, pwedeng speeches, all right? So there are many, many kinds of input for listening that you can use. And do not be scared to try various types. Okay? Be adventurous in terms of that. Number 5, setting up a listening goal. All right, this is different from yung number 1 kanina. So setting up a listening goal is that you give them a text to listen to. So pwedeng audio recording yan, pwede yung video, okay? And then you are going to tell them, all right, we're going to listen. While you're listening to it the first time, to identify the topic, for example. That's one listening goal. Second listening, you tell, I will play again, okay, or I will again. While you are listening to it the second time, I want for you to identify some of the important keywords in the text. Tapos, thirdly, your goal is to be able to like maybe create a simple outline of the most important parts of the listening text. That's a listening goal. Okay, if you do that, your learners will have a direction in listening to you or to your video or audio recording, and that's going to help them understand what they're listening to. Next one, simultaneous reading and listening. So medyo na-discuss ko na to kanina. It's always better that there's a visual support while your listeners are listening, or you read while your students are listening. So you can provide them with a text, the actual text of what they're listening to, so that they could follow as they listen. Doing tasks while listening, okay? So hindi naman kailangan na pag-play ay makikinig lang sila ng 5 minuto nang walang ginagawa, okay? Pwede rin naman that you give them a diagram to complete, or you give them a closed activity while they are listening. or you give them whatever task, okay, as long as they do it while listening. Next one is using visual aids. So this is related to reading and listening, to provide ng visual support. Using visual aids could mean you present pictures or you present a motion video while they are listening. The principle here is that if they have other sources of information that could help them construct the meaning of what they're listening to, it's going to be a more effective listening experience. So use visual aids. Next one, slow rate of speech. All right? So piliin natin yung mga videos or maybe modify natin yung setting ng video so that it can be slower than the actual. Kasi nga, the rate or the speed of speech is affecting comprehension. Diba? I told you a while ago, the faster the rate of speech, the lower the comprehension. So you have to flip that. You give them a slower speech so there is increase in comprehension. Okay. Adapting and improving listening material. You can always adapt materials, but be very cautious about adapting materials. Of course, you have to scrutinize the materials, all right, and study them on your own. Improve listening materials. That's what I told you a while ago. When I did Beowulf, I recorded my own voice because my students my students are more familiar with the sound of English that I speak more than the sound of the. Find a reading of Beowulf from YouTube, all right, or from the internet. Pero since British yung nabasa nun, so that familiar, and not be that familiar to my students. Unlike if I would do it myself and my accent is Philippine English, then they will have a better sense of understanding what I am reading to them. In this case, what are listening to. Okay, next. Encouraging prediction. So halimbawa, you are a teacher, you are showing a video to your students about events in history. You can pause somewhere there and encourage them to predict what they think might happen, given na hindi pa sila familiar doon sa topic na yon, di ba? So that is also going to aid them process the information they have listened to. And syempre, when their classmates give input, that's additional help for them to be able to understand and construct meaning. Next one is repeated listening, okay? It's okay to do repeated listening to clarify information, to set up different learning or listening goals, okay? And so this is something that we can do. All right, so I have shown you 12 examples of intervention strategies for listening difficulties, and I would like to end with this simple quotation from Adams in 1998. He said that listening is best learned through listening. This is coming from the idea that we will best be able to learn reading by reading more. So listening is best learned through listening. Anong ating insight dito kay Adams? Do not be afraid to give listening activities. In fact, be encouraged to give more listening activities because that's how our learners will learn to listen properly and more effectively. And be the kind of teacher who knows how to create listening activities that are based on research, that are well thought out, okay, and that be aware about the listening difficulties that your activity might pose to your students. So try to remedy or try to reduce those listening difficulties. So again, listening is best learned through listening. So whatever your subject is, always try to give a listening activity because it's one way your students can learn. Now that you are aware of the difficulties and what you can do, then there is no reason for you to be afraid to give listening activities. That is all that I am going to offer to you today. Thank you all for listening. If you have questions, I would like to entertain them. If we are not able to answer all questions, you can find me on Facebook. It's Leo Carion. So just give me a private message. I will try my best to answer your questions. And please don't forget that I am also on YouTube. My YouTube channel is called The Creative Professor. Again, The Creative Professor. So please subscribe to my channel because I am going to give more videos that talk about English and online learning platforms and digital learning tools that you can use as a teacher in the new normal. So thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we will proceed to the question and answer portion.
All
The
right.
first one is from Miss G. Lim. How are we going to address these students if for them they prefer to learn the lessons through writing and reading?
Okay. So you see, in the course of our discussion, Miss Gina, in the course of our discussion, we are able to see already that listening is a neglected language skill. In fact, some researchers call it the Cinderella skill kasi lagi siyang aping-ape. Tapos ang stepsister niya is si reading and si writing or speaking. Okay, so how are we going to deal with that? I think one of the ways that we can do is to give them interesting listening activities. Okay? Di ba kanina sabi natin, the listening text that we're going to give our students should be easy for them. Okay? So therefore, if a listening activity is within the range of the learning level of our students, they're not going to be afraid of it. Plus, add to that, if they could relate to the listening activity, and if they find the listening activity interesting, then they would probably try to do it. And after all, as a teacher, you are the one who knows your student much better, right? So try to incorporate all these principles and tips that we discussed today to try to encourage your students to learn from listening by starting with listening texts that are relatable, that are within their head or their level, and that would be very interesting to them.
Thank you so much, sir. Next question po is from Miss Jocelyn Prades. What listening activities can you suggest, especially to public schools, that will focus much on modular modality? Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, I forget, Josephine, Miss Michelle, what's the name again?
Jocelyn po.
Miss Jocelyn, Ma'am Jocelyn. All right, so we are all very aware that there are different modalities right now in DepEd. And if your students are doing the modular approach among the modalities, kasi di ba like meron online or blended and then there's the modular approach, remember that when they are given their self-learning modules, ang kasama nun or it is coupled with the TV and broadcast modality, which is of course a listening activity in itself. So what you can do is that to encourage your learners to listen and to view is kasi yung self-learning modules, it doesn't mean naman na sila na lang mag-aaral sa bahay, di ba? What you can do, kasi magko-communicate ka pa rin with your students even if they are in modular approach, what you can do is assign them probably topics in the module that they have to answer or to read or to learn about by watching or listening to DepEd Teleradio or DepEd TV. Alright? So kasi supplementary, parang mag-asawa yung dalawa. They are paired together. So I encourage your students to do that. DepEd has a schedule for the lessons, so make sure that your students are aware of the schedule and just mention to them that you need to do the modular activities, the module activities by listening to DepEd Teleradio, which does not require internet connection, or DepEd TV. So I think that in itself, you will be able to give your students a listening activity even if they are in the modular approach.
Okay, there we have it. So that's all the questions that we have for now, sir. So in behalf of VIBAL Group Incorporated, I would like to thank you, Sir Leo, for being our speaker this afternoon, for giving us an insightful learning session. It is truly an honor to have you with us, sir. And to all our Kabibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat. Goodbye, everyone!
Thank you, everyone.